Hello, everybody. Welcome to your very favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell. And today we're going to be reading Spidey comics from August of 1984.
That's right. And to celebrate, we have a very special returning guest, Dustin Windebank.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be back.
All right. Don't get too excited, Dusty. It's only Spidey,
Woo!
right? All right. Okay, so we've obviously talked about your we've talked about Spidey before with you. We've talked about growing up reading comics. So we can just jump right into the fray, I guess. We are in the middle of the Black Costume saga. What are your feelings about the Black Costume, Dustin?
It's interesting because it's so iconic. I mean, I was reading it, and my daughter came over, and she was immediately like, "I thought you were reading Spider-Man comics. Why is that Venom?"
Yeah.
So interesting. That immediate identification that that's Venom.
Right.
Now, of course, she's 11, so there's a different world. I remember the symbiote costume when I was a kid and being like, "Oh, that's so cool." And I like the way that it's coming into the stories slowly. So I think we'll hit on that in the comics.
Right. It's cool. It's a mystery, right? Like no one really knew what was going on, so that's cool. So first, let's start off with this cover, which I will be using for the thumbnail. I really think this cover is cool. Josh, what do you think of this cover?
It's another cool one with the Red Ghost. I remember. I think it's pretty good. I think that I just remember the previous issue with the Red Ghost and how great that cover was.
Yes.
With it was like the pink light shining on the ghosts and the apes as they're hanging on the building, and the way that the light wrapped around, it was really cool. This one's really cool too, but it just kind of reminds me of the
how good
one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because that one was great. Well, here's the thing: is that the Ron Frenz is a great penciler, but he's inked by Josef Rubenstein, who I have never been a huge fan of. And if you look at this cover, it's a great idea, it's a great concept, but I find the inking looks just really amateur. I don't like it at all. So if you look at the Red Ghost's face and the Super Apes, they look pretty terrible, to be honest. It's more just a good idea. Dustin, what do you think?
Oh, definitely. Like you look at the detail and the fineness and the cross hatching on the Red Ghost's face. It's just not. It seems clunky. Right.
Okay, so we're gonna jump into this issue. Go ahead, Josh.
Actually, jumping off of that, it's kind of funny too because there's a panel in the issue that really stood out to me of the Red Ghost face that I thought was extremely well done. It's on digital page 7, the bottom right panel.
I love that.
He's like, it's so good. He's got this really intense, evil, menacing look. His face is half in shadow, and it's just two colors. Really, it's this grayish purple, and then this bright, sickly yellow green color that's highlighting his face, and it's so well done. And then you compare that to the cover, and it's just I don't know. It's a huge difference, and I think it's so much better in the actual issue.
Right. So let's just quickly summarize this. We start off with a mysterious figure breaking in to a what's it called, a penthouse of a building, and I think at first we're meant to think it's Spider-Man. I'm assuming because he's wearing an all-black costume. But then once he reveals his face, we find out it's this old man, right? Which I believe this is his first appearance. We've never met him before, and then he quickly encounters the Super Apes and the Red Ghost, who we all know from Spider-Cast from a few weeks back or a few months back, and whom we love because he's a great freaking character. We touch base with Spidey, who's washing his costume, and then we turn to the subplot of Spider-Man, going to sleep at night, and then something happening with his alien costume. Because again, we don't the readers don't know exactly what's going on yet. Sorry, I'm just watching Dustin with his cat. Anyway, we get some touching base with him referring to Black Cat and all that, and then we basically find out the secret plan of the super apes, or sorry, the Red Ghost. I guess the Red Ghost is probably the brains of the operation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't even remember, what is it? He wants to steal something, right? He wants he wants the Silver Fox. Sorry, we didn't even mention. So the character ends up being the Silver Fox, who's like a master thief, and the Red Ghost ends up basically forcing him to help him steal. What is it he wants to steal again?
He just wants money. Yeah, because he's like trapped in a house and he won't leave. So he's pretty much like forcing this guy to steal for them, or else he'll send his ape goons to kill him. So
right.
He's kind of stuck in this.
It's because he needs funds to finish his cosmicizer.
Right.
That's what it is.
And then so basically while the Silver Fox and the Super Apes are in the middle of breaking into this building, Silver Fox tries to get away because he doesn't really want to help them. But in the meantime, Spider-Man intervenes. And, of course, it ends up, in fisticuffs with Spider-Man fighting them. And it kind of turns into a typical superhero battle with wisecracks and, fighting for a few pages. And that's pretty much it. And then at the end, the Silver Fox ends up disappearing. The Red Ghost doesn't get what he wants. Yeah, he's pissed off at Spidey. He's like, "You shall pay." He doesn't get what he wants, so Spider-Man wins the day. But then we get a little subplot at the end of somebody who we assume is the Hobgoblin talking about how he basically realizes that Spider-Man has been following him because he's got a spider tracer on his van, and he's like, "When next we meet, surely Spider-Man will surely die," and that's pretty much the end. So again. Oh, go ahead.
And the implication is that there was a trap set for him. There was a trap because he put the tracer on the war wagon, and he was tracing it down, and he brought it for a trap. But then he got interrupted by having to deal with the fox.
Right. So basically, again, a decent issue of Amazing Spider-Man. Not as good as the high watermark set by Roger Stern and John Romita Jr., but still a solid superhero, Marvel story. Dustin, what do you think of this issue?
It was okay. There were some really interesting bits in it, and I got the feeling. And sorry, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the authors at the time, but I felt like the author was trying to really weave some themes through it.
Yeah, Tom DeFalco. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, first, even that, you think it's Spider-Man who's doing the theft, but then it turns out it's really Black Fox, and they tried that hard as far as
Oh yeah, right. Why did I call him Silver Fox? Anyway, yeah, it's Black Fox. Okay.
Yeah, and they tried hard to make it seem like it was Spider-Man for the first page, which was sort of interesting. But one thing I found interesting is both Black Fox and the Red Ghost were so driven by fear. There's just lines over and over again, but through both of them. Black Fox is terrified of the Red Ghost, and there's an implication that the Red Ghost is agoraphobic and scared to go outside. And he talks about how he's going to increase his cosmic power 1,000-fold, so he doesn't need to be fearful of the Fantastic Four anymore.
Right.
Strange, this theme of fear on behalf of the villains.
Interesting. Okay. Josh, did you know? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dustin.
Oh, there's just this line "No, I can't leave this apartment. Such an act would be akin to suicide."
Right.
Very melodramatic concern of their own safety.
That's a good point. I didn't even notice that. Josh, did you pick up on that at all?
I mean, yeah, I was kind of waiting for it to kind of connect into the story a little bit more and maybe play off of that fear, but I don't think at the end of the day it really kind of connected. I thought maybe he would force the Red Ghost to go outside, and that's kind of his fear would be his downfall or something. But it's kind of interesting, and I think that really all it does at the end of the day, which I really enjoyed, was just kind of give the characters a little bit more depth, the villains a little bit more depth, and kind of make them more human. Especially since we're dealing with this old man who is a ghost who also controls apes that turn into everyday objects. It's just freaking ridiculous. So I definitely appreciate those small little moments kind of sprinkled throughout.
Yeah, I was similarly expecting that fear theme to turn into something.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Dustin, what's your impression of the Red Ghost and the Super Apes? Have you come across them before?
Oh, well, I had the Guide to the Marvel Universe as a kid. So I read their entry and was like, Spider-Man. Well, I was an X-Men guy as a kid.
Okay.
So, but other than that, I've never really ran into them again. I don't know how prevalent they are as Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery.
They're actually originally Fantastic Four characters. So they're created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. I think if you go back and read those original stories, they have a really cool science fiction, like 1950s bend to them. And I don't know, I've always thought they were really cool because the second Spider-Man comic I ever read had those characters in it. So I've always had like an affection for them. But they're not quite as good in this issue, but still good. And as I said before, I do think the art in this issue is good, but it is really ruined by the inking. And it is nice if you flip through the pages, if you look at how many pages there are with like 9 or more panels per page, right? So it's that classic Marvel style storytelling. It's very clear. It's really succinct, but like I said, it's ruined by the inking. And so there's not really, other than the Red Ghost panel that you mentioned, there's not really one panel that stands out as a great panel. It's more just an overall, it feels like a classic Marvel comic. But it's not really great.
I definitely like the layout that the penciler's done. Like all of the angles and the like blocking of the characters within the panel is really good.
Yeah. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with kind of like the layout of everything. The action lines and kind of the way that everything is framed really helps tell the stories. To tell the story, I mean, even the action, like tell the actions and like what the characters are kind of planning or thinking. I mean, particularly on page original 11, they're standing on the rooftop, the black fox with the apes behind them, and the building that they're standing on, it's actually pointing, like it makes an arrow pointing right at the estate jewelry store.
Good point.
Just like, I don't know, it just like there's a lot of little things like that really kind of help tell the story without having to stop and have a narration of the bad guys just arrived at the jewelry store and well the jewelry owner's in for it. So, you know, it's just like over explaining the action. I'd rather just see what's going on and have the drawings kind of tell that story. I mean, you can really tell the difference between the two styles of storytelling through the art when you go from the Amazing Spider-Man to Marvel Team Up. Let's delay that as long as possible. But anyway, since we're on the page, I want to talk about, you know, even like the top of this page, the top panel, the silhouette of all of them on the top of the building. That's a great shot. That's a great layout. Then we cut to the next panel, like you mentioned, how the corner of the building is pointing to Estelle Jewelry. And again, this is the reverse S format of the page, where the lines of each panel are you can cut through them and it leads you to the next panel. So you see in the very bottom, one of the apes has turned into like an eagle, and its wings are kind of connecting and pointing to the panel above it. So it tells you where to go. Then if you look, the characters lead into this like abyss. So you really get the feeling that they're hanging over the city, right? Because there's no detail there. It's great. Mm-hmm. Then the next panel, the lines, again, they run together in a nice diagonal there. And then it leads you to the last panel. And then, you know, your eye follows up through Black Fox's arms and then up into his shoulders and then right to the next page. So that is a really well laid out page. And they're pretty much all like that. So, yeah.
Model art.
And if I were to pick on anything in this page, it would again be some of the inking.
Right.
There's some of the line work is not as good as it could be.
It's just sloppy. Yeah. It just looks really amateur. Anyone could do it. Yeah.
Well, like that garage door that they're about to, or the roll down gate over the door that they're about to break through. It looks like I did it in grade 9.
Right. Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's amateur. There's nothing professional about it, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So yeah, I do recommend this issue. Again, not a classic, but if you want, it's not a masterpiece, but it is a classic. It's a classic Spidey story. So again, not groundbreaking, but I definitely recommend it as a classic Spider-Man story. Dustin, what about you?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I like the fact that this Amazing Spider-Man and the Spectacular Spider-Man are definitely happening like in the same world. They're referencing each other, so but this one feels like the supporting story.
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just kind of a filler. Like, this doesn't really have much to do with the overall ongoing arc. It's kind of just like a filler story with let's throw a classic villain in there and let Frenz draw him, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and sometimes the villain of the week story turns out great.
Right. Definitely. And then we've also introduced the Black Fox, who definitely comes back in future stories, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, Josh, what's your final take then?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Again, maybe it's just because it's pinned up between these other two issues that we're talking about, but I really had a lot of fun reading this one. I love kind of horniness with the villains, but giving them a little bit of depth kind of grounds them in reality, even though they are these kind of like wild concepts for characters. Like it's a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend this one.
Right. Okay. So on that note, let's jump to something that we're probably not going to recommend, but I don't want to jump the gun. Josh, you can summarize Marvel Team Up number 144.
All right. So we have in this issue we have Spider-Man and Moon Knight, and okay, I'm going to try my best again. I'm so sorry for our listeners that have to put up with me recapping these Marvel Team Ups. But it's always just so freaking confusing. So we have this funeral for this man named Do Yang, and Moon Knight shows up to the funeral, and this man's son, Chu Yang, kind of confronts him, and it turns out that Moon Knight and this old man, they kind of helped each other, and like Do Yang would like give him information and ask him to like help clean up the streets, and he kind of like, they helped each other out. From here we cut to a flashback. This is like the story. This is like the issue for flashbacks.
Right.
We have this like origin story, kind of the Logan, who is this villain who has been like terrorizing Chinatown, and has kind of like become this like new leader of one of the mobs there. So they call them the dragons. I think he's the White Dragon, and he's in charge of the dragons. So Chu Yang wants revenge, and he wants to kill the White Dragon, and Moon Knight is kind of like trying to hint at he probably shouldn't be doing that. So then we cut over to Peter Parker, and he gets a job to go, funnily enough, go to Chinatown and report and take pictures of some crimes that have been happening. And he runs into his friend Phil, who he used to go to school with, and they kind of start talking. And then we get another origin story for this guy, who is in like a different like society, I think they called him, in Chinatown. He's with the Tiger Claw Society. But anyways, back in China, we find out that he was being trained by this like master warlord of almost legendary fame, it says. And there's like this accident, and his master dies, and this like rival gang throws a grenade in the house, killing his parents. So he moves to New York, and he vowed never to resolve any conflict with violence.
Right.
So now that he's kind of like almost next in line to lead the Tiger Claw Society, they're looking to him for leadership, but he's not really stepping up to fight the White Dragon because he's vowed not to get into any conflicts like that. So it turns out that the White Dragon is showing up to his place above this restaurant, and Peter helps out as Spider-Man. Some fights going down, White Dragon spitting fire. Moon Knight shows up, and then everybody kind of disperses once the fighting is done. And we see Moon Knight don his alter ego, Jack Lockley, and he meets up with this informant. And this guy tells him that the White Dragon was actually freed from prison by another gang, but he's not too sure which gang. They didn't get like a name or anything, so that's all the information that Moon Knight has. So he goes off to kind of try to solve that mystery. And then we catch up with Spider-Man, who goes into, I think it's a jewelry shop, and the White Dragon is there, and he's trying to pretty much kill Phil Chang to kind of like take charge of all of the gangs in Chinatown. And another important thing that I forgot to say, because there's just so much happening.
Right.
Chu Yang is also doesn't want Moon Knight getting involved, because everything that happens in Chinatown has to be resolved by people that live in Chinatown in these gangs. Like, they're not allowed to get outside help.
Right.
So the White Dragon beating up Phil, and he's refusing to fight. Chu Yang shows up and tells everybody that he's placed or he tells Spider-Man that he placed a bomb somewhere, and he won't tell Spider-Man where it is. So Spider-Man can't help Phil because he's trying to look for a bomb so nobody dies. Phil's getting like the snot beat out of him, and then Moon Knight shows up with this guy from another gang, and it turns out that it was Kingpin who freed the White Dragon from prison, so that way he could have control of all of New York, including Chinatown, because that was the one place he didn't have like a section of the mob. And because the White Dragon got help from people outside of Chinatown, he was then kind of like turned on, and everybody turned on him, and Moon Knight was able to step in because he was no longer a member of the gang. Peter Parker finds the bomb, and then that's pretty much where we end things off. I mean, so much happens, and it feels like nothing really matters.
Right.
Like, it's just like events happening and like needlessly complicated.
Yes. I'll give it points for trying to tell a full story in one issue. I'll give it points for, trying to incorporate all these subplots and characters and backstory. Yeah. However, it does not. It's like you said. It's one of those things where there's so much going on, but it feels like nothing happens. Right? Like, you finish the comic, and I don't want to read it again. It's like off-putting. Like, whereas the Amazing Spider-Man, it pulls you in. This one pushes you out. Right?
I think it's just so weird that they kind of like set up these weird rules too for Chinatown. Like, it was just like the fact that like not accepting help outside of Chinatown society is super weird, and it's just like it's only in the story to have the like twist of the bad guy got outside help, so that's how everything resolves. Like, it's just this weird like box that they trap themselves in. If it was just this mystery of who the White Dragon is and where he's getting all this help from, and it's Spider-Man and Moon Knight and Phil trying to figure this out without violence, then I think that's so much more of an interesting story than what we have here. It's just like,
and there's a lot of just random things happening.
Right.
Like when Peter comes to Chinatown, and I didn't realize this at first, the person who gives him a ride over is Moon Knight. Moon Knight's the cab driver.
Right.
But why? Like, there's no reason that Moon Knight. There's a lot of people in Manhattan. The fact that it happens to be Moon Knight as his cab driver, and they're both thinking, I better stick around and see what's happening here. And it's actually confusing which one's thinking which bubble, because you just don't assume that the cab driver happens to be another hero.
Right. Oh boy. So Josh and I have reviewed this writer before, Cary Burkett, and I don't remember which issue it was that he did, but it was pretty terrible. I remember that. So overall, Dustin, what's your impression of the actual writing in this issue?
Oh, it's rough. Yeah, it's rough. There's, like I said, there's some random things going on. It's Marvel teamed up, but they only talk to each other for one sentence, like 1/3 of the way through the book, and never interact again. Most of their interactions happen as his cab driver for some random reason. Which doesn't make any sense. And then another thing that's going through all of this is that Peter is really critical of his friend for not wanting to use violence. And that just, to me, but Moon Knight's supporting it. So he's like, Philip Chang, you are a wise man for not using violence. But Peter's very critical of it, which just seems wrong to me. Like, the idea of Peter Parker being critical of a pacifist seems like a mischaracterization to me.
Right, and yeah, that's a good point. And something I think the Spider-Man we all know in our hearts, we've seen him mischaracterized a lot in this era, depending on the writer. Like, we've seen Denny O'Neil turn him into a complete cold-hearted prick, and now, like you said, we have another writer who barely wrote any Spider-Man stories, but doesn't seem to quite understand the character. Because I definitely agree. It's like, I don't know for sure if Peter Parker should be against that, but it does seem out of character. Like, Josh, what do you think of that?
It's so weird because, like, I think that could work, right? With the whole with great power comes great responsibility. He has this, like, he's the leader of this society. He has the ability to protect the place and was trained with these powers. So, like, I can see it. I can see there being a story where that could make sense, but the way it was written, it's completely out of character.
Right.
So maybe I can see where the writer was coming from, but it was not executed properly, and it does seem like it's not Peter Parker.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. There is a line that parallels, that Peter says, that is clearly paralleling the with great power comes great responsibility. He basically says that to Philip, who's the pacifist, trying to, like, get him to do something. But his criticism, I don't get it, is just not right.
Right. Now, again, we've talked about the art here by Greg LaRoque before, kind of unremarkable, but definitely serviceable. Dustin, what's your impression of the art on this one?
Yeah, it doesn't, like the last one, you even gave the idea as we broke down the blocking on that one page where it just really draws your eye.
Right.
It doesn't have that, and maybe it's just because so much shit is going on that the penciler can't kind of go, because some of these pages, especially in the end, where there's like there's the dragon versus Philip, there's Moon Knight flying around with this guy, there's Peter in the background, Spider-Man dealing with the bomb, and the art in some, especially in this section, reflects that sort of, like, it's all over the place.
Right. It just feels like, for lack of a better term, it feels like an imitation of a Spider-Man comic, Like, it's so obvious that, I mean, granted, they did try to, it's not like, there's far worse ways to fill 22 pages, and I see that a lot in modern comics where they just have 2 scenes and 5 word bubbles and they fill 22 pages. So there's far worse ways to do it. But I just really wonder why. It's like if an editor is letting the story go through, what is the editor really doing? Why isn't the editor saying, okay, take this story and cut it that you don't need and then resubmit it as a new draft, right? Like, that's what I would expect. I don't know.
Yeah. This does read to me like some fanfic where someone was like, Moon Knight's awesome, Spider-Man's awesome. Let's do some shit in Chinatown.
Right. And basically, like, not knowing what to include and what to leave out. That's the key problem, I think, with this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely don't recommend it. I don't ever want to read it again. Dustin, what do you think?
I'm on the same page with you there.
Yeah. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, get this comic out of my face. I'm done. I'm so done with this. The only cool thing I think about this, I really do like the costume for the White Dragon.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool.
Yeah, I think he's kind of like a fun character, and it might be interesting for him to kind of show up again in another comic. So yeah, we'll see.
It's only 6 more issues to go, Josh. Then we're done Marvel Team Up.
Oh my goodness, thank God.
All right. So now we're going to jump to Peter Parker. Dustin, would you like to summarize this one for us?
Sure. And it's interesting because compared to the last one, there's both so much less and so much more going on.
Right.
So it starts off with the answer terrorizing some random hoods. And he basically gets some information from them about a body, and we don't really know too much about the body, but the body's in the morgue. Then there's Peter Parker back in his apartment, and he's really, there's a lot of exposition as he's thinking about what happened previously between him and the Black Cat, his money issues, his relationships with issues with the Black Cat, he gets harassed a bit by his landlady. And then there's this quick little moment. I saw something moving in the bathroom, something black.
Right.
And of course she like jumps to it. Is it that bimbo of yours, Parker?
Right.
She's thinking it's the Black Cat. But then Peter goes and checks the bathroom. There's his Spider-Man costume hung up. But we know it's the symbiote. So that's kind of a little interesting thing that's slowly building up that background mystery, as you mentioned in the last episode. So that's playing through both of these. Another interesting thing that parallels for both this one and Amazing Spider-Man is both of them. He actually goes out web slinging to clear his mind because he's having issues. So he heads out. There's also some parallels between them with him thinking about the Black Cat. But he goes to go visit the Black Cat and decides at the last minute that he doesn't want to see her because... And this seems to be almost the real story here, even though there's a comic adventure going on.
Right.
In the background, now we stumble on the real adventure, which is that Spider-Man is dating the Black Cat. They're a couple. But the Black Cat doesn't recognize Peter Parker.
Right.
She is in a relationship with Spider-Man, and she actually describes Peter Parker as excess baggage, and doesn't want him to say. So they're talking, and they don't know the answer, which is the masked villain from earlier is listening to them. And so they're about to, break into the conversation, and she actually says, "Don't say it. Don't say that person's dull name." And because of that, the answer doesn't get to hear Peter's real name. I can't stand it to hear you talk about yourself as that dull person. So, and she's being melodramatic, but it's interesting. It's a real thing, and I really felt it's similar to when Batman talks about what Batman's real name is. There's a famous scene where, and there's a couple variations on it, where, Wonder Woman uses the lasso of truth on him, and what's your name? And he says Batman. Because he is Batman, right? So Peter is the exact opposite of there, right? Spider-Man is Peter Parker. You don't really refer to Batman as Bruce Wayne in the same way. And so there's a lot of relationship drama here, and then the answer goes back. He misses hearing what Peter's real name is. He goes back. It's the Kingpin. Everyone's working for the Kingpin, which I think is true of a lot of this era of comics.
Sure. Yeah.
Turns out he's working for the Kingpin. The Kingpin has a plan for Black Cat and Peter. We don't really know what it is, but he wants the answer to get them back together, and he's got a plan for it, as well as the body from earlier. And there's a couple references to the morgue. There's this story going on in the morgue in the background as well. That doesn't, it's just sort of filler. The answer goes back, confronts the Black Cat, and then from there, he ropes her in because she has ongoing debts to the Kingpin. The Spider-Man's still out. He gets in a little kerfuffle with some people that are in the middle of a heist, wraps him up, brings him down to the police station, where he finds out that currently there is a hostage situation with the Black Cat and the Answer off at a building. So the Answer has a Black Cat tied up as his hostage, and he's got his hand on a dead man switch and a bomb. Peter tries to stick his hand down on the bomb, and that's a failure because the Answer, who I'm not really too familiar with, but he seems to have that sort of, I have the answer for everything situation.
Right.
So he pre-coded everything with anti-stick stuff. So he pulls his hand off. Peter has to grab the tied up Black Cat and jump off the building. The building blows up, to the chagrin of the local police who are too impressed that he let them blow up the building. Turns out it wasn't. Turns out it was fireworks. It wasn't real, and that the Answer was really using that as a distraction to steal that body from the morgue side story. And now the Answer goes back, reports back to the Kingpin. Here's the body, and I successfully got Spider-Man and the Black Cat back together again. So the idea of that action and that rescue is gonna repair whatever bonds were straining. Sort of the implication as far as what the Answer and the Kingpin's plan was. But it's kind of left. It's very sort of heavily dangling there. We don't know what the body is. The Kingpin wants. We don't know why he wants to make sure that Spider-Man and the Black Cat stay together. And that's it. We're left hanging.
So Josh and I have talked ad nauseum about Spectacular Spider-Man. We're kind of on the fence about it usually, but first, what's your impression of the art in this issue, Dustin?
Yeah, it's actually sort of similar to some of my feelings on The Amazing Spider-Man. A lot of the blocking is pretty good, but because I'm looking at the last page right now in the scene in the morgue, and it's just really, I don't know if it's thinking or what, but the nose on the police officer who's working the morgue is a bit off. It just seems a little rushed, I guess. I'd be proud if I did it, but it seems rushed.
Well, here's the thing. Al Milgrom's kind of known as a terrible penciler, and Jim Mooney is usually seen as a good inker. And I think that, if anything, Jim Mooney helps the pencils. I don't think Al Milgrom is great, but I think at least in this issue you can see that he's a clear storyteller. I mean, his anatomy is kind of wonky. Like, whenever a character is in an out of ordinary position, you can tell that he doesn't quite have a grasp of anatomy. But if you look at it as kind of like a 1950s throwback where everything's very plain and straightforward and not experimental, I can appreciate it on that level. So I definitely don't hate the art. I think it's. I actually like. I really love the inks. Jim Mooney's a great inker, I think. But yeah, Josh. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dustin.
I was going to say on the inking, you can see the difference. I mean, it looks like he has a ruler, and
right.
Just step up.
Right. Josh,
as always, Jim Mooney. Yeah, as always, Jim Mooney does a great job inking. I mean, we've been talking about how great he is since I think the first episode with The Amazing Spider-Man when he was teamed up with John Romita Jr. So yeah, I really do enjoy the inking.
Yeah. Now, as far as the writing, Al Milgrom, again, not known as a great writer, he had a run on Hulk that I could not read, could not get through. Dustin, what's your opinion of the writing on this issue?
I didn't mind it. I liked. To me, basically the storyline with the Answer and the Kingpin was just a sideshow that I was not really that interested in, and it was. But basically the relationship between the Black Cat and Spider-Man / Peter Parker, this sort of love triangle between the three of them, it was very interesting. I liked that.
Right. Yeah, it definitely wasn't bad. I didn't hate it. It's probably better than an average issue of Peter Parker. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely one of the better issues of Spectacular in the last little while that we've read. Unfortunately, I think it's still tainted by the fact that like we're getting the same story over and over again with Black Cat and Spider-Man.
Yes.
Where like this is happening every week for us when we're reading it, is like they like, oh, I want to be with you, but I don't want to be with Peter, and it's like this back and forth, and they always like flip-flop what side they're on. Half the time Felicia's like, I don't care who you are, it doesn't matter to me, I love you, so you just be you. And then the other times she's like, ugh, Peter Parker, that's disgusting, don't say that peasant name around me. Like, she's so like, it's just always so weird. I mean, even Peter being like, oh, I'm gonna have to go yell at Black Cat about coming into my apartment, but then kind of doesn't really like get into an actual, I don't know, it's just so flippy floppy between issues that I personally didn't enjoy it. Enjoy reading this one as much.
Yeah, and I could see that would be, it would be could get pretty stale fast if that was an ongoing soap opera that just kept not resolving.
And so unfortunately we're kind of counting down with Spectacular too, because we know that I believe Al Milgrom leaves at issue 100, and then we get Peter David coming on at 103, which I am really looking forward to. But we still have to slog through at least 7 or 8 more of these, so we'll see.
I think the big thing for this like ongoing story, if I don't know, if it was the same thing happening every week and it was something interesting, or like, I don't know, like if it's something that we're getting, like if we're getting something out of it, like with this one, it's like we see the writing on the wall. We know that these two are not going to stay together. You know what I mean? Like we know that it's not going to work because it's this constant like conflict between the two. We never actually see them together enjoying each other's company.
Right.
Like, we just see them say, wow, we're in love. And then it's them fighting for the rest of the issue. Like, it's just kind of like, I at this point, I'm getting nothing from Spectacular, because I just know that it's going to end in horror with these two, and they're not going to be together. Something bad is probably going to happen to Black Cat, and she's going to disappear for a while before she reappears. And it turns out she didn't die the entire time. So,
well, it's basically the whole series has become, she loves me not, she loves me not, and it's just back and forth every issue. And I mean, they've thrown in this new character, the Answer. He's an okay villain. I hate his costume. Dustin, what's your take on the Answer? What do you think?
In this story, sorry, how do I even express this? In this story, the Answer is nothing. he's just a person who has a plan ahead of time. Maybe he was interesting in previous episodes, but in this, he's not really given enough time. He's not given enough action. He's just this, like, all perfect genius who's doing the Kingpin's bidding.
Right. Well, so Dustin, are you going to read the next issue to find out where the story goes?
I think I will, but it's because it has Cloak and Dagger in it.
Yes, I'm looking very forward to that. Unfortunately, we've already got a different guest book, so we can't have it back.
Okay.
But
I'll take a look at it. Yeah, I used to read Cloak and Dagger as a kid, so as soon as I saw that next episode, find out what happened with that body and Cloak and Dagger. So I'll read it.
There's some really good Cloak and Dagger appearances because they first appeared in Spectacular Spider-Man, so I would definitely recommend seeking those out because there's some really good ones in this run for sure.
I think that that first appearance of Cloak and Dagger is my favorite issue of Spectacular for sure. It might be my favorite one that we've read on the podcast.
Ooh.
It's very good. I really
it was definitely good. I believe it was Rick Leonardi that drew it, and he's one of my favorite artists for sure. All right, well, I guess that wraps up another episode of Here Comes the Spider-Cast. We definitely want to thank Dustin Windebank for joining us again.
Well, thanks for having me.
For sure, we'll have you on again, and we're in kind of an in-between period here. This is in between Roger Stern leaving and Peter David joining, so it's a little bit shaky right now in Spidey Comics, but we're going to weather the storm, right, Josh? We're going to get through it.
Right, yeah.
All right, so Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, we also want to thank you guys for listening. It really helps when you guys leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at HCTSpidercast. Please let us know what you guys think about the issues that we're reading and the podcast itself. We really want to kind of get that feedback from you, and let's keep that conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider-Cast.
All right, see you then.